So I'm going to give you an example of why audiation and dictation are actually different things. So if I go to a piano and I play a C, an E, and a G, these are three different notes that are within a major chord. I play them together, they create this harmonious sound that sounds like a block of sound to a lot of people. Some people with a greater ability to discern individual pitches will be able to hear the individual notes in there. So they'll be able to hear the lower note, the middle note, and the top note. And they can extract that from the harmony that they hear. Now, if you don't know how to read music, you don't know how to notate that. But you still might have the ability to hear C, E, and G independently within a solid chord. So I'm going to go ahead and play this chord, and I'm going to show you something that you can do. So what I'd like you to do when I play this chord is listen for the bottom note and see if you can make it stand out. I'm going to play it a few times. Can you hear the lowest note? Maybe not. So what if I play this note? That's the note you're listening for. Now try to hear it in the chord. Can you hear it now? Listening for that note. So most of you will now be able to hear that lower note in the C major harmony. If I then play the middle note and I ask you to listen for that note, you can now make that middle note stand out. Listen for this note in the harmony. It's probably standing out. And the more you listen, the more clear it will become. Now I can ask you to alternate between C and E, just trying to isolate those two notes in the chord and make them stand out. You hear that bum, 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 bum? If you can, but you don't know how to notate this, then you have an ability to hear and extract independent lines from a simple chord. Now this is where dictation and audiation differ. So if you want to dictate this, you have to know what the bottom note is, which I might tell you is a C, and then from there you have to use your relative pitch to determine, okay, the E is a major third away, and then the top note is a minor third away from that E. Okay, that is the note C, E, G. So this requires an intellectual knowledge. You understand how to dictate this music once you pick apart that chord and you hear the three individual notes. And this can happen with a melody too, if you have a harmony that moves from a 1 chord to a 4 chord back to a 1 chord. You can listen for those independent voices and you can hear how they're moving. And maybe some of you heard the bass note stayed the same, the middle note, it went up and came back down, and the top note stayed the same at first, then it went up and it came back down. So you had this on top. The two notes moved. So if you have an intellectual understanding of music, then you can notate that. But you can also do this internally. So you can sit there and you can listen for the bottom note, a middle note, and a top note. Some of us maybe can't hear a chord. We can only hear 2 lines. Some of us can only hear 1 line. So imagine yourself sitting there listening to a particular melody, like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is one I like to use because most people know it. So audiate that in your head. What you're doing right now is you're not actually audiating, you are imitating a sound that you've already heard. But it's the same basic experience as audiation, because when you hear it internally, that's what people that audiate do as well. So when you are trying to audiate something, it's usually something you haven't heard before. It's something you're creating in your head. And you can have this ability to hear a single line, and 2 lines in your head and not have any idea how to notate that, not be able to read music, not understand anything about time signatures, rhythm, any of it. And that music will always stay in your head. You'll never be able to extract it until you can learn to notate it. Or if you're a really good player and you can play by ear, then you can actually extract it that way by figuring out what the notes are and then just replicating what you hear in your head. So what I'm getting at here is that dictation is a very particular skill that allows you to articulate what you are hearing internally. It allows you to write it down on paper. But you do not have to be able to dictate music to audiate music. And this is something that is often misunderstood, even in some ways by the founder of Audiation, Dr. Gordon, when he talks about the 6 stages of audiation. A lot of those stages are dictation stages. They are important stages because one leads to the next, and it allows you to develop both this ability to dictate and articulate what you're hearing, as well as audiate. But the pure process of audiation, which can be taught separate from any understanding of how to notate music, is the ability to hear one line in your head, add a second, and you're composing at this point, add a rhythm, add a third, change the timbres, start to hear an entire orchestra work if you can work up to that, or for many of us, maybe stick to a 4-part texture at first. So audiation requires no knowledge of music. It only requires the ability to hear internally. And that is the difference between audiation and dictation. Dictation's important, but it will not create audiation skills. It just won't. I had an amazing ability to dictate music when I was younger, and I still can dictate music. Obviously, I compose everything in my head and then I dictate it. So I have both. I have audiation and I have dictation. But when you are trying to develop the ability to compose internally, you separate these skills. And that's one of the things that I teach in my own course on audiation, where we go through a process that teaches you audiation. Dictation separate. Dictation is going to be that flawless ear training course that I have. I mean, that teaches you dictation. But you want to train these faculties separate. So let me know if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Objections, I'm more than happy to respond to objections. But this is very much my perception of audiation based on my experiences and working with others. And I have found audiation and dictation, they're separate skills that can be combined. They can come together, but they don't have to. You train them separately at first, and then eventually they do merge. If you have a high level of ability to dictate, then you can also probably audiate at a high level if you've developed the specific skills of audiation. So that's something that I want to kind of talk about, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the difference between audiation and dictation.